Dear listeners, I ask you to listen to the story until the very end and be sure to write a review about what you liked and what needs to be changed to make it more interesting for you to listen to my stories. Tank attack in the Falaise cauldron. The smell of burnt metal and diesel clung to the air like a ghost that refused to leave. The fields of Normandy, once green and full of life, were now a wasteland of twisted steel, charred remains, and the echoes of war. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the bodies of fallen machines and men alike. Somewhere in the distance, artillery thundered, shaking the ground beneath my tank, but I had long since stopped flinching. You either got used to it, or you didn't last long enough for it to matter. I was sitting inside my Sherman, the turret creaking slightly as we adjusted our position. My name is Rick Garner, and I was the commander of one of the many Shermans thrown into the meat grinder of the Falaise Pocket. We were supposed to be the anvil to the hammer of the British and Canadians, trapping the remnants of the German army in France. Simple in theory. In reality, it was hell on earth. The radio crackled with static, and a barely intelligible voice barked orders. We were moving forward. Again. My driver, Sullivan, muttered something under his breath, something about rolling straight into the gates of hell. He wasn't wrong. The Germans weren't retreating in panic like some officers had expected. They were fighting like rabid dogs, desperate to break out before the pocket slammed shut. That meant ambushes, counterattacks, and the deadliest thing of all, tigers. The first time you see a tiger tank, really see it, it does something to you. It's not just a machine. It's a monster. The kind you hear about in old folk tales, the kind that devours everything in its path. Our Shermans were tin cans in comparison. If a tiger saw you first, you were dead. No second chances, no lucky escapes. Just a flash, a roar, and then nothing. As we rolled forward, past the smoking wreckage of what had once been an Allied column, I saw the telltale signs of an ambush ahead. Burnout trucks, a knocked-out tank, and eerie silence. I ordered the gunner, Mendez, to scan the tree line. Nothing. It was never nothing. Then it happened. A streak of fire, an explosion, and the Sherman to our left was gone, replaced by a plume of smoke and fire. The turret had been blown clean off, landing several yards away. No one got out. Tiger. Someone screamed over the radio, but I already knew. I shouted at Sullivan to turn, to get us out of the line of fire, but another explosion sent dirt and metal raining down on us. The engine roared as we veered off the road, crashing through the remains of a stone wall and into an open field. Open. Exposed. A death sentence. Find it. I yelled at Mendez, my throat raw. Find it now. Through the sights, he scanned frantically. Then he stopped. There. 11 o'clock, hull down behind rubble. I didn't need to look. I could already feel the beast staring us down. We had maybe seconds before it reloaded, seconds before our fate was sealed. Load armor piercing. I bellowed. Fire. Fire now. The Sherman shook as the round left the barrel, screaming through the air toward the tiger. A hit. Sparks flew as the shell slammed into the thick front plate, only to bounce off like a pebble. We were dead. Then the tiger fired. The world went white. The force of the blast threw me against the interior of the turret, the impact rattling through my bones like a church bell struck at midnight. My ears rang so violently I couldn't hear my own breathing, couldn't even tell if I was breathing at all. Smoke poured into the compartment, thick and acrid, filling my lungs with fire. For a split second, I thought we were done, that the tiger had finished us off in one shot like so many others before us. But when the world slowly bled back into focus, I realized we were still moving. The shell had hit, but it hadn't penetrated. A miracle. Drive. Get us the hell out of here. I shouted, barely recognizing my own voice. The panic, the raw, animalistic fear, it was clawing at my throat, but I shoved it down deep. Sullivan didn't need to be told twice. The engine roared, the treads churned up dirt and debris, and we lurched forward, zigzagging as best we could to make ourselves a harder target. Another explosion erupted behind us, throwing up a column of dirt and fire, too close. The tiger was reloading faster than I'd expected. It was toying with us, lining up the perfect shot, waiting for that one moment of hesitation. Mendez was already ramming another shell into the breach, sweat pouring down his face, his hands moving on instinct alone. He didn't need orders, didn't need me to tell him what had to be done. We all knew. There was no time for strategy, No time for careful positioning. It was kill or be killed, and the odds were stacked against us. Gun ready, Mendez barked, his voice hoarse. I grabbed onto the sights, scanning for any weak spot, any vulnerable piece of that steel monster that we could exploit. The Tiger was turning now, bringing its barrel to bear on us, its turret rotating with an eerie, mechanical grace that sent a shiver down my spine. We had only seconds. Go for the tracks, I yelled. Fire! The Sherman rocked back as the shell erupted from the barrel, streaking toward the Tiger with a vengeance. A metallic scream followed as the shot slammed into the left track, sending a spray of steel shards flying. It wasn't a kill, but it was enough. The Tiger groaned to a halt, its forward momentum broken, its mobility shattered. It was still dangerous, God, it was still the deadliest thing on the field, but now at least it was a wounded beast. We didn't wait to see what happened next. Sullivan gunned the engine, pushing the Sherman toward a patch of burnt-out trees, anything to get us out of the Tiger's direct line of fire. I could hear other tanks engaging, the deep, chest-thumping booms of German 88mm cannons and the sharper, frantic cracks of our own guns. The battle was raging all around us, a chaotic, swirling hell where survival was measured in seconds, and luck meant more than skill. We crashed through the underbrush, the branches scraping against the hull like fingernails on steel. My breathing was ragged, my hands shaking as I gripped the hatch. We weren't out of this yet. Not even close. Then I saw it. Movement through the smoke. Silhouettes shifting like ghosts in the twilight. Infantry. German infantry. And they had Panzerfaust. I barely had time to react before the first streak of fire shot toward us. The Panzerfaust, a crude, deadly tube of destruction, was in the hands of a desperate soldier, and desperate men never hesitated. The rocket-propelled grenade whistled through the air, slamming into the Sherman's side armor with a deafening crack. The blast rocked the tank, throwing me against the hatch so hard my vision blurred for a second. The armor held, barely, but I knew we couldn't take another hit like that. Machine gun. Light 'em up. I barked, already pulling myself together. My body wanted to collapse, my mind screamed for a break, but there was no time for weakness. The coaxial .30 caliber gun shattered to life, spewing hot lead into the tree line where the silhouettes crouched. I saw figures drop, twisting as they fell, but more kept coming. These weren't fresh recruits. These were hardened men, trapped in the Falaise Pocket, knowing they had nowhere to run. They weren't surrendering, weren't breaking under pressure. They were fighting to the last breath, and that made them even more dangerous. Another Panzerfaust flared up, this time from the right. Sullivan saw it too late. The rocket hit just below the turret ring, where the armor was weakest. The explosion sent a wave of heat through the hull, filling the compartment with choking smoke. The Sherman groaned, metal screeching as we lurched to a stop. Direct hit. We were done. For a moment, everything slowed. I heard nothing but the crackling fire, the distant artillery, the pounding of my own heart. My mind raced through the possibilities. Bail out and risk being gunned down, stay inside and cook alive, wait for another hit to finish us off. None of them were good. None of them meant survival. Then, through the swirling smoke, I saw something move. A shape bigger than a man, bigger than anything that should have been moving toward us. At first, I thought it was another Tiger, a second monster coming to finish what the first had started. But then I saw the uniform, the helmet, the way he moved with purpose rather than caution. An American. 2 of them. No 3. Infantry, our boys, charging forward through the chaos like madmen. The leading soldier held a Browning automatic rifle, the long barrel spitting fire as he tore into the Germans flanking us. Another lobbed a grenade, the explosion sending bodies flying. They weren't retreating. They weren't waiting for orders. They were coming to save us. I barely had time to react before the hatch above me burst open and a rough hand grabbed my arm. "Move your ass, tanker," the soldier shouted, his face smeared with dirt and sweat. "This thing's about to blow." I didn't hesitate. I didn't think. I climbed. The air outside hit me like a hammer, the mix of smoke, gunpowder, and burnt flesh clogging my throat. I stumbled as I hit the ground, my legs screaming in protest. Mendez and Sullivan were already out, their faces pale, eyes wild with adrenaline. Then, just as we cleared the wreckage, my Sherman, the tank that had carried me through battle after battle, let out a final metallic groan before the fire inside found the ammunition rack. The explosion swallowed it whole. The shockwaves sent me sprawling, dirt and debris pelting my back like a hailstorm of death. My ears rang. My vision swam, but I was alive. Somehow, against all odds, I was still breathing. I rolled onto my back, staring up at the darkening sky, and for the first time since this battle began, I let myself feel something other than fear. I felt something I hadn't dared to believe in. Hope. Hope was a dangerous thing in a place like this. It made you think, just for a second, that maybe you'd make it out, that maybe this wasn't the end. But the battlefield had a way of crushing hope just as quickly as it gave it. As I lay there, gasping, the ground trembling beneath me from distant artillery, I knew one thing for sure. This fight wasn't over. Not for us. Not for anyone trapped in the Falaise Pocket. A shadow passed over me, blocking out the dimming sky. One of the infantrymen, the one who had dragged me out of the Sherman, leaned down and smacked my helmet hard enough to rattle my brain. "On your feet, tanker." "We're not done yet," I groaned, pushing myself up with arms that felt like lead. My whole body ached, my head pounded, and my hands shook from the adrenaline that hadn't worn off. But there was no time for that. The Germans weren't going to wait while I caught my breath. I looked around. The 3 infantrymen who had pulled us out were moving quickly, weapons raised, scanning for movement in the smoke. Their uniforms were covered in dust and dried blood, their faces hardened in a way that only came from seeing too much death in too little time. One of them, a lean soldier with a cigarette dangling from his lips, glanced over at me. "Your tank's done," he said flatly, nodding toward the burning wreck. "You're with us now." I didn't argue. Sullivan, Mendez, and I grabbed whatever we could. Mendez still had his sidearm. Sullivan had managed to pull a Thompson from the wreckage, and I found myself gripping a battered M1 Garand someone had dropped in the dirt. I barely knew how to use it, but at this point, it didn't matter. We moved fast, keeping low, weaving between craters and the skeletal remains of burnt-out vehicles. The air was thick with the scent of death and cordite, the sky above painted in the fiery hues of war. Somewhere in the distance, engines roared, tanks, but whose? Ours? Theirs? It didn't matter. If it moved, it could kill you. The lead infantryman, the one who had pulled me out, raised a fist, signaling a stop. We dropped to the ground, hearts pounding. Then we heard it. The unmistakable growl of a Tiger's engine. Not far. Too close. I gritted my teeth, gripping the Garand tighter, as if the worn wood and steel could somehow protect me from the behemoth lurking ahead. The soldier beside me, the one with the cigarette, let out a slow breath. "That one's still moving," he muttered, barely audible over the distant gunfire. "Looks like it got past the line. That was bad." The whole point of this battle was to trap the Germans, keep them from escaping the pocket. If Tigers were breaking through, it meant they were close, too close, to finding a way out. And if they got out, this bloodbath would have been for nothing. The leader motioned for us to move. Quiet. Careful. We crept forward through the ruins of a once thriving French village, now reduced to rubble and broken memories. The Tiger's engine rumbled, idling somewhere up ahead. A street over, maybe two. I could feel it, like a predator watching from the shadows, waiting for us to make a mistake. Mendez wiped his face, smearing soot across his cheek. "We don't have anything that can take that down," he whispered. The infantryman in front of me, the one with the bar, gave a grim smile. "We don't need to kill it," he said. "We just need to blind it." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He reached into his pack and pulled out something that made my blood run cold. A satchel charge. Explosives. Enough to rip a tank apart if you could get close enough. I looked at him like he was insane. Maybe he was. The plan was suicidal. But then again, so was staying here. The Tiger's turret groaned as it turned, scanning the ruins for movement. We had seconds, maybe less, before it spotted us. The soldier with the satchel charge grinned, tossed his cigarette, and whispered, "Cover me." Then he ran. And just like that, I knew this battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. Time slowed. The soldier sprinted across the broken street, his boots kicking up dust and ash. The satchel charge bounced against his back, a bundle of death strapped to a madman. He moved like a ghost, weaving through rubble and shadows, but the Tiger was no fool. Its turret stopped turning. It had seen him. The moment stretched, hung in the air like a held breath. Then, the Tiger's machine gun opened up. A storm of bullets ripped through the space between us, kicking up stone and dirt, punching through old walls like paper. The soldier dove, rolling behind a collapsed brick wall just as a burst of tracers sliced through where he had been a heartbeat before. "Covering fire," someone yelled. I didn't think, I just acted. I raised a Garand, fired blindly at the tiger's vision slits, at anything that could make the gunner flinch, make him hesitate for even a second. Mendez was already firing, Sullivan unloading the Thompson in desperate bursts. The others joined in, the bar rattling, spitting fire and fury. The tiger's machine gun swept across us, sending us scrambling for cover. I heard a scream. One of the infantrymen went down, clutching his leg, blood pooling in the dirt. But then, deafening roar. The satchel charge exploded. The world went white. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine, my brain struggling to process what had just happened. The tiger's right track was gone, blown apart like a child's toy. Smoke and fire spewed from its side, the great beast shuddering, wounded but not dead. The turret was still moving. "Oh hell, it's still alive," Mendez shouted. Of course it was. Nothing ever died easy out here. The tiger's cannon was shifting now, trying to bring its main gun to bear on us. One shot. That's all it would take. I scrambled, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The infantryman who had planted the charge was crawling now, dragging himself away, his face streaked with sweat and soot. He wasn't fast enough, and the tiger's barrel was locking onto him. Sullivan moved before I did. He shot up from cover, Thompson in hand, and ran straight toward the tank. I didn't understand what he was doing until it was too late. He wasn't running away. He was climbing. His boots found purchase on the tiger's shattered track, his hands grabbing onto whatever steel he could as he pulled himself up onto the burning beast. The tank commander must have been stunned from the blast because no one stopped him. Then Sullivan did the craziest thing I had ever seen. He pulled a grenade from his belt, yanked the pin with his teeth, and slammed it down into the open hatch. For a moment, just a moment, everything was still. Then he jumped. The grenade detonated inside the tiger with a deep, gut-wrenching thud. Smoke and fire belched from every seam, the turret jerking violently as something inside went horribly wrong. And then, at last, the beast stopped moving. Sullivan hit the ground hard, rolling over onto his back, coughing, his uniform blackened with soot. I rushed to him, grabbed his vest, pulled him up. "You crazy son of a..." He grinned, coughed again. "Worked, didn't it?" I laughed. Maybe from relief. Maybe because I didn't know what else to do. The battlefield around us was still chaos. The sounds of war raged on. But for that moment, in that ruined village, we had won. We had survived. And in this hell, that was the closest thing to victory we were ever going to get.